Okay, our third and final video about the causes of the emergence of the Cold War up to 1955 is just solely going to focus on the crisis over Korea. So in our previous two videos, we've looked at ideological differences between the United States and the Soviet Union, tensions within the wartime Grand Alliance, the nuclear arms race, and disagreements over the future of Germany. And what we'll be looking at now is the final cause. Actually, where we're going to start isn't with Korea at all, it is with China. In the years before the Second World War, and also throughout the Second World War, China was embroiled in a civil war fought between the communists, led by Mao Zedong, and the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai shek. After the end of the Second World War, when Japanese forces had been defeated, the civil war went on. And it lasted until 1949, when the communist Mao's group were finally successful and China became the second major communist state in the world. And we ended up with the People's Republic of China. Chiang Kai shek and his nationalists fled to the island of Formosa, or Taiwan, off the Chinese coast, and they maintained themselves as an independent democratic state aligned with the United States. Now, this is significant because we'll see that the world, led by America, formally recognized Formosa, or Taiwan, as being the official China and tried to sideline Mao Zedong's Communist People's Republic of China. Now let's get back to where we really want to find out about, and this is the state of Korea. In the years before the Second World War, Korea had in effect been a Chinese colony. At the end of the Second World War, Japanese forces were forced out of Korea, and the northern part was occupied by communist forces of the Red Army that had been ordered in by Stalin. They'd advanced from the Russian Far East, and the southern part of the country, or the area below the 38th parallel, that was normally a democracy. In the south, the leader of the Republic of South Korea was Syngman Rhee. Now, Rhee had spent most of his life in exile in America, so it's very much America's man in the region. In the north, we had Kim Il sung, grandfather of our current leader of North Korea, and he led the so-called Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Without warning, in 1950, North Korean Communist forces invaded South Korea. Their aim was to seize control of the whole country and forcibly make the South adopt communism. And this led America in particular to panic. So what we can see is within a matter of weeks, the communist North had occupied all bar a very small area in the southern tip of South Korea around Busan. The United Nations were called into action, and a request was put in by the Americans to send a peacekeeping force to South Korea, to the Busan enclave, to stop the spread of North Korean forces any further south, and then eventually to turn it around. Now, I'd let you know that the United Nations is made up of a Security Council, and in the Security Council we had the five main powers of the post-war Second World War, post-Second World War world, namely Britain, France, the United States, China, and the Soviet Union. If a peacekeeping force was ever going to be deployed, all five of the Permanent Security Council members needed to agree. So you would have thought there's no way that the Americans would be able to get their way and have a UN-sponsored peacekeeping force sent to Korea. But the reason it happened was the Chinese seat, permanent seat on the Security Council, wasn't occupied by the People's Republic of China, Mao's China. Rather, It was Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists in Taiwan. And in reaction to this, the Soviet Union had abstained from voting. It had withdrawn from the Security Council. So when when the United States said to the UN, can we send a peacekeeping force? The answer was yes. Understandably, Stalin was furious, and from this time onwards, the United Nations would be viewed with some suspicion by the Soviets and Stalin in particular. So as soon as the UN forces landed in South Korea, the tide of the war changed. UN forces really were American-led. It was a multinational force, but it was directed by the American military. And we can see very quickly that the communist forces have been pushed far north of the 38th parallel, and in fact, the aim of the United States very much became not one of containment, not just containing the North Koreans at the 38th parallel, but rather rollback. You can see they're getting closer and closer to both the Chinese border and the border with the Soviet Union. And this began to worry Mao in China a lot. In his worst case scenario, you'd end up with UN forces at the behest of the United States moving into China. Douglas MacArthur, the leader of the American forces, was very much a hawk. He wanted to destroy communism in the region. And like his president Truman, he felt upset that China itself had fallen to communism. Unsurprisingly, the Chinese reacted, and they sent hundreds of thousands of troops across the border from China into North Korea, crossing the Yalu River. And we can see this human stream pushing forward here. And really what that did, that again turned the tide of the war. It's a seesaw type effect, and the UN forces ended up getting pushed backwards. MacArthur now is becoming more and more desperate, and he is pressurizing his president, Truman, to start using atomic bombs. Fortunately, this never happened. So I think if it had, the Soviets would have reacted, and we could have ended up with a third world war with atomic weapons being used. In 1953, we had a new president coming to power, Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower, some of you might remember, as being the leader of the forces that invaded Europe in D-Day. He entered politics after the Second World War and became president. But part of his electoral campaign in 1952 was that he was going to go to Korea. In other words, he was going to bring about peace. A peace was negotiated, but what we ended up with was, in effect, a truce line that near enough marked where the 38th parallel was before. All along it is a demilitarized zone. South Korea, even to this day, remains a base for tens of thousands of US troops who are backing the South Koreans as a deterrent against future North Korean aggression. Other things that we can see that came out from the Korean War. This was when we could really say that China emerged as the world's third superpower, but also it was the first time where we saw a large-scale fight between forces backed by the United States and forces backed by the communists. The Chinese provided troops. The Soviets really provided some sort of arms-based support, but they never had troops on the ground. So we've now come to the end of our overview of the 5 reasons that led to the emergence of the Cold War up to 1955. So to summarize for a final time, we had ideological differences that split the United States and the Soviet Union. We had tension between the Soviets and Americans in the wartime alliance in the Second World War. We had the impact of the nuclear arms race that followed the dropping of the atomic bombs in Japan in August 1945, and then disagreements over the future of a post-war Germany. And then finally, we saw the crisis over Korea. All 5, taken together, helped the Cold War to emerge in the years up to 1955. Going forward, what you're going to be doing is preparing for your first essay, where you'll be assessing the relative importance of these 5 factors in causing the Cold War to emerge in the years up to 1955. Hopefully what you'll have found is with some of my explanations, it has made the textbook and note-making tasks a little bit more understandable, but also given a little bit more context to the video you've been watching from the Brave New World series. So I look forward to seeing how your work develops over the coming weeks. Thank you.